Welcome back to the Dr. Wendy Walsh Show on KFI AM 640, live everywhere on the iHeart Radio app. You know, one of the things I teach is developmental psychology. And part of human development is growth and dealing with all the changes that happen with growth and even aging, and also maintenance, maintaining our good mental health, maintaining our physical health, but also loss. Because life is also about loss. And not knowing how to deal with loss, not knowing how to grieve, can obviously impact your mental health, but even your physical health. I would like to introduce a special guest today. I think you've been on this show before, Dr. Ava Cadell. Hi, Dr. Cadell. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Dr. Wendy. Yes, I was in studio many years ago.
And I'm sure we were talking about sex because you are the queen when it comes to sexology. Dr. Ava Cadell, if you don't remember, is a clinical sexologist and ASEX certified sex counselor. And she is a founder of something called Loveology University, an online university for love coaching, as also a private practice. Deals with everything from the most common mismatched sex drives to power struggles, infidelity, orgasm barriers, fear of intimacy, sexual compulsion, sexual healing, etc. However, I always say, Dr. Ava, people think I talk about sex a lot on this show, but I do not talk about sex. I talk about relationship dynamics. And if I ever talk about sex, it's only in the context of relationship dynamics and how things sort of come out sexually.
But people seem to, focus on the sex part. It's still taboo enough that it makes such a big impact on people that that's all they remember.
It's funny. And I bet when they come to you as clients, they come with a sex issue and you're able to drill it down to the relationship issue that caused it.
Well, yes. And actually, it usually has nothing to do with sex. It's basically communication. It's a lack of, boundaries and just intimate communication so that they speak the same language, whether they're left-brained or predominantly right-brained. But sex is part of it, but it's not all of it, as you well know.
Right. I always say it's sort of the symptom often for something else. So,
right.
People listen to me because I talk a lot about how to fall in love, how to have healthy love, how to have healthy communication. I don't talk enough about loss, but whether it's divorce or whether it's a breakup with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or whether it's grieving the loss of a loved one who's passed. Dr. Ava Cadell, you've had some very experiential learning in this area. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And strangely enough, I've evolved into becoming more of a healer than a sexologist because of my own experience. And that was that my beloved husband, who I was with for 27 years, he passed away. And nobody prepares you for that. And so it was so traumatic for me, even though I knew it was going to happen because he had cancer, that when he did pass away and when I watched him take his last breath, I could not get that vision out of my mind. Well, I never will. And my heart still has a hole where I love him so much, but I've managed to heal myself. And so now I have this healing program where I love to help others to heal, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and even sexually.
And, we've actually had many guests, or not guests, but callers, listeners of our show call in with this issue, this sort of complicated grieving, especially after a very, very long relationship. Help us understand how a committed, intimate, romantic relationship becomes a part of your identity, not just your social identity, but your sense of self. Can you explain that?
Well, first of all, intimacy has really nothing to do with sex. I've discovered that. I thought it did for 20 years, actually. But intimacy is much more important, much more lasting, and truly helps us with empowerment and enlightenment as human beings. And so after you lose somebody, you have to you have to grieve, and there's no right or wrong way for grieving. And so I explored every way that I could, using pet therapy and humor and water and music and crystals. And we're so individual, just like our fingerprints, that we need to help everybody listening to the show, because there's not one cookie cutter solution for all the people who are grieving today, who've lost someone, as you said, not just by death, but a divorce can be even worse than death for some people.
Oh, especially if you're seeing them on social media, if you're still seeing friends who are giving you news of them. It's like having the ghost of your marriage around you at all times while you're trying to get over it. It can be particularly difficult. But when I talked about our identity, I just got married like 6 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So exciting.
Although we've been together for 4 years. But to have this experience where I'm now functioning, I call it, as half a brain, meaning that we've kind of united in, our division of emotional labor, our division of intellectual labor, obviously our division of household labor, has all taken this burden off me because I was doing everything. And I realize the benefits of being in a long-term, intimate, committed relationship. But I think to myself, if anything ever happened to him, I would feel like half of me had died. Did you have that feeling when you lost your husband?
So, yes, this is very interesting what you're saying. However, my husband and I had a very unique marriage in that he had his identity as a very powerful, successful attorney. And then I had my identity, as a love sex doctor who traveled around the world lecturing. And then we had the identity of us together. Mm-hmm. And that was wonderful because he took such good care of me. And I felt very nurtured. And I lost all of that when he died. So since then, it's been challenging for me because I have to do everything myself.
Yeah.
So I have to be, completely independent. And I'm trying to like it.
It's like all of a sudden you have this whole other job. I remember years ago, a friend of mine lost her husband and she was a work colleague, and she came to work and she goes, I never knew that he watered the lawn. My lawn is dead now. I didn't even know. Like, when did he do that on a regular? But there is like literal stuff. Hey, we have to go to a break, Dr. Cadell. When we come back, let's really do some news you can use for people who may be dealing with loss. Things they should do, things they probably shouldn't do to help heal themselves. You are listening to Dr. Wendy Walsh, the Dr. Wendy Walsh Show. My guest is Dr. Ava Cadell. We are live everywhere on the iHeart Radio app. Right now, let's go to the 24-hour KFI newsroom. How long has it been since he passed away, Dr. Cadell?
Well, this year is actually his 10th anniversary. And I finally got his book published, which is a promise I made to him before he passed away.
Oh.
So I'm actually celebrating this. This is the first year.
And we should say that people can go to the KFI website, KFI640.com, search Dr. Wendy Walsh, and we're going to have information on his book. So you can read it. You mentioned he was a powerful attorney, so I'm sure it's filled with lots of juicy Hollywood secrets as well.
It is. It's called Blood and Justice on the Sunset Strip.
Oh, wonderful. So let's talk about in the early days of dealing with this loss. What were the things that you would not recommend that people do? Maybe things you tried.
Well, I would not recommend dating right away.
Why is this?
Because you're trying to replace someone who's not replaceable. Because you're trying to numb the pain, and that's not the way to heal. And you want to surround yourself with loving people, not complete strangers who just want to maybe have sex with you. It's really the worst thing you can possibly do.
Years ago, I went on a date from a dating app with a gentleman who had lost his wife, I think in the, maybe close to a year before, maybe 10 months or something before. And for the entire 2 hours, he talked about her. I was a good listener. It was a good stories. But at the end, I was like, he hasn't asked me one thing about me. He was still in mourning, and I was there as witness to his grieving. So I understand what you mean. It was way too early for him to be out there
Yes,
dating. That's
yes.
for sure. Okay, what else should people not do?
Don't get rid of all his or her clothes immediately and all their belongings. Don't give everything away or sell everything.
Oh, why is that?
You will regret it.
Ah,
It's something that people do when they're still in shock. They even get rid of their bed. They get rid of everything, their photos, because they think they're on a time limit to stop grieving. And there is no time limit.
it's so interesting. So go ahead. Tell your story first.
I had a client who his wife died and he left her clothes in the closet for 2 years. But there's nothing wrong with that.
And then he was ready. Yeah. And then he was ready. As a friend of mine said, when they lost their father and they kept his closet intact for quite a while, at a certain point, they had to get rid of the shoes. They were stinking. But, it's funny you say this because when I was 30, both my parents died in 1 year. Breast cancer, lung cancer, bad year. And my aunts showed up when my mother died, yes. And literally went through her closet, packed up everything, sent stuff to the Goodwill, did all in one weekend because they were coming from out of town and they had to get their flights. And I was paralyzed emotionally and physically. There was no way I could figure out to do all this. And by Monday morning, like the funeral was Saturday, by Monday morning, her whole life was packed up and gone. And I see what you mean because I'll sometimes say, where did that little painting go that she did? Where was that little piece of jewelry? And gone. Just gone.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so what should people do if they're grieving? What's some good advice that worked for
Well,
you?
number one is to practice self-care because grief can cause appetite loss or overeating, sleeplessness, lack of energy, difficult concentrating. So you need to really strive to eat as a well-balanced diet and rest and exercise and talk to your doctor and talk to close friends and just be good to yourself. It's the most important thing. If there's only one thing you do, it's self-care.
I know you mentioned dating probably not a good idea. What about socializing and social support at this time?
Interesting. Yes and no. Go out and socialize, but don't talk about your grieving because people will stop inviting you. I know that sounds so callous, but I've seen it many, many times. You can choose one person who you know and talk about it, or find someone else who also perhaps has lost someone. But to talk about it to everybody can actually be quite embarrassing. And it's just something that I don't recommend.
And if somebody is an extrovert like me and externally processes, then this is a time to talk to a therapist, right?
Oh, yes. A therapist, close friends, people who may be in your temple or your church. Yes, talk to people who listen, who want to listen, and welcome the support of others. In fact, surround yourself with people who do love and care for you. And please allow them to help you with everything. That's another thing that some people, they punish themselves and they think, oh my gosh, I've got to take care of my legal matters. I've got to do these tasks. I've got to do that. And they become overwhelmed. And sometimes they have panic attacks because they can't do everything on their own.
Yeah.
So welcome the support and express your feelings and your gratitude to those people.
And let's talk about timing. There used to be an old-fashioned rule that you were supposed to be in mourning for 1 year. Does that rule apply?
I don't think any rules apply because we're all individuals. Absolutely not. All rules are made to be broken.
But how do we know when it's too long, when we've been unable to let go and it, goes into a full diagnosis of complicated grieving and clinical depression?
And depression.
When do we know?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question because nobody really knows. But you can tell when you have recovered, when you've taken control of your life instead of letting life control you. And recovery also means making a commitment to love yourself as much as you loved your beloved who has passed. So it's knowing when you have recovered and reinvented your life without the fear of being hurt or abandoned again.
And that for some people may take a couple years.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people never get married again, or they never have a long-term relationship. They surround themselves with animals, or they do, I bought a spiritual retreat as part of my healing and my recovery. I bought this retreat from monks. It was always something I had manifested. So allow yourself to manifest what is going to make you feel, let's say the word normal. It's not my favorite word, but recovery is knowing that you are normal and that you can handle anything that the universe throws at you. But you have to be ready. You have to be strong physically, and you have to be, you have to have your self-love and feel good emotionally, spiritually, psychologically.
Dr. Ava Cadell, I love your advice about especially social support. Get out there and talk to people, but not necessarily about your grieving. It gives the brain a little break. Dr. Ava Cadell, where can people find you if they want to find out more about your spiritual retreats and your books?
Just avacadell.com, AVACADELL.
Always.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy.
Always a treat to have you on the show.
Do.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for listening. You have been listening to the Dr. Wendy Walsh Show on KFI AM 640. We're live everywhere on the iHeart Radio app.